friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie, yo 715. Titan that neighborhood. My brothers and sisters. The man that we going back to today, I just realized earlier today that I have reacted to more than 100 of his freaking videos, being team. And that man that I'm talking about is Mike from that chapter. It is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike. And the title of the video is Predator Realizes Police Discovered His Horrifying Secret 20 Years Later. Now, the biggest thing that I got a problem with this freaking title is 20 years later, being team. Like, oh my God, man. But at least they caught him. And now I'm hoping that he actually get life in prison. He get what he deserved. Because y'all know how many videos we have watched over and over and over and over and over again of these freaking murderers being let free, getting like 2 years, 8 years, 180 days. If you know, you freaking know. Like, it be crazy, y'all. But hopefully this man gonna get what he deserves. And we're about to see. But before we see, Bean Team, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need, please. We are back to Mike from that chapter. Y'all got what y'all need, y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
You've likely seen before that sometimes the most obvious answer is not the right one, but sometimes people just want to force that to happen to get the answer that they're really, really looking for, even when all signs point to something else. People will oftentimes look for the easiest explanation. You know, you just want the problem solved, but sometimes that can ruin someone's life. That's sorta what happened right here when 18-year-old Angie Dodge was found murdered in her own home. When the following investigation began and it ended up coming up short, it turned into one of those, you know, it's late, you'll do type scenarios. I think by the time I'm finished telling this entire story, which started off as a story, turned into a saga, you'll probably be shaking your fists at the screen, at me, just like I was when I was researching this story. Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, we're looking at a story, a saga, which lasted almost 30 years altogether. In fact, you can put an asterisk kind of beside what I just said because it's still going on right now. It has more twists and turns than you can shake a stick at, just like you'll be shaking your fist. So let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go. And get whatever you may need. And I just gotta point out from what Mike just said, y'all, I'm thinking that number one, this ish might not even be solved. This may be an unsolved mystery, and it leads into number two, just the fact that it's looking like, man, the police or whoever did do the investigation, you know, the investigators or whoever, the government, the judicial system, it seems like somebody gonna be failing us in this story, y'all. You know what I'm saying, man? Like, the evidence gonna be right there in their face, but they still gonna turn a blind eye to it. It's just a guess. It's just a hunch, being team. Let's give it a go.
It was the year 1996, and two women were rocking up to a house located at 444 I Street, which is in a pretty residential part of the city of Idaho Falls, just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Snake River, which bisects the city. These two women were going to this house that morning, which was June 13th, 1996, because a co-worker hadn't showed up for her shift at the beauty salon, Beauty for All Seasons, where they worked. And it was very unusual for her just to, not show up, not even call, and she had done none of those things. The house they were going to, as I said, was in this quiet little part of the town, very residential, and the house was in fact subdivided. So there was, a downstairs apartment and an upstairs apartment. They were going to the upstairs apartment. Now, as you can imagine, as you probably yourself have experienced, a coworker just not showing up for their shift, not calling, it's not the craziest thing to ever happen, but it was just weird. Her mom was even calling the store, asking to speak with her, and so that was eventually what kind of spurred them on to just go and double check on her and make sure that she was okay. Knocking on the door was Julia Antoni, and living in this apartment was 18-year-old Angie Dodge. Angie had only been living in this apartment about 3 weeks. About 3-ish weeks by this point. She had just recently split up with her boyfriend. Angie was the youngest of 4 at 18 years of age and the only daughter. She was born in Washington, went to preschool in San Diego, her dad was in the Navy, and then the family all moved to Idaho Falls, where she spent most of her life. She was very close to her family, especially close with her 3 older brothers, who you can imagine would all be very protective of young Angie. After high school, Angie Dodge had gone to Idaho State for a little bit before eventually getting a job at this beauty salon, a Beauty for All Seasons, and she'd moved into this upper story apartment about 3 weeks before this, in the middle of the summer of 1996, and she'd moved out of the family home after she'd gotten into, a bit of a tiff, bit of an argument with her mom, Carol. I think Carol thought that maybe she was, growing up a little bit too quickly, and she disagreed heavily with that, and so they hadn't spoken to each other for a couple of weeks by this stage. But if you can believe it, the night before this, which was June 12th, 1996, Angie had gone over to the old family home and had a sit-down conversation with her mom, Carol, and they just, mended everything. Their relationship was they both apologized to each other, talked the issue out, and it was great. All was right with the world once again. It was then, the following morning that Julia and Tawny were, asking, where's Angie? Julia and Tawny found the front door of the apartment to be unlocked, and so they let themselves in to the place. And the home was this apartment was dead quiet, completely, not a peep anywhere. They walked through this entire apartment. They saw a couple of empty, red mugs around the place, red cups around the place, the ashtray, still quite a few cigarettes in it. It wasn't crazy messy or anything, but you could tell a few people had probably been here the night before, having a few beers and kind of stuff like that. So they kept walking through the apartment looking for Angie, calling out to her until they got to the room at the very back of the apartment. And that was Angie's bedroom. In there was just a horrific scene. Angie lay on the floor, her head against the wall beside a mattress. She was soaked in blood. A call went to the Idaho Falls police at 11 a.m. Angie had been killed viciously. There had been a struggle, and Angie had been sexually assaulted and stabbed 14 times. Dang. Then left to bleed to death on the floor of her bedroom, her back to the wall. It was a very gruesome scene.
And I'm already thinking, I'm pretty sure some of y'all thinking that it was her ex-boyfriend, right? You know what I'm saying? I think Mike said she just had broke up with her ex 3 weeks before she moved into this apartment. So I'm thinking it's him. But it's also, I want to just point this out real quick. It is a good thing to know that her and her mother, they made things right. You know what I'm saying? Literally the day before this happened. You know what I'm saying? They mended their fence, so to speak, and made their relationship back good. Cleared the air with each other right before she died, man. Because that would have hurt her mother even more, just to know that both of them weren't even on good terms when Angie died, passed away. I just be trying to look at some good things in the madness being seen, but I'm thinking it's the ex.
There was no sign of forced entry into the home, but whoever had done this was obviously a vicious and gruesome predator. This was Idaho Falls, 1996. This just doesn't happen here. This is a very small, tight-knit community. I mean, everybody who lives in Idaho Falls back in 96, they're all good Mormons. No killing allowed. Murders just don't happen here, especially of, young 18-year-old women who were just living, first time ever living by themselves. Doors that previously went unlocked were now locked. It sent a shiver down everybody's spine, and this was one of those cases that needed to be solved yesterday. It was pretty horrifying. Word quickly spread of the scene at 444 I Street, reaching Angie's friends fairly quick. And she was popular. She had an extensive friend group. This was the talk of the town. The police then, immediately went on the hunt. They began gathering any and all suspects they could. Any men they knew her, which quickly became almost every man in the city of Idaho Falls. Though the killer hadn't left behind a murder weapon, which was a knife, he had left behind quite a lot of DNA, which they could, hopefully then match up and test against, any suspects they had. But from the start, it wasn't going anywhere quick. The night before, Angie had been chilling in her apartment, only there about 3 weeks. She did have some friends over for a couple of beers, but wasn't anything crazy, and they didn't leave too late. The authorities determined she likely died sometime between 12:15 a.m. and 11 a.m., which that's almost a 12-hour window. That's a long time frame from when somebody came in and did this. Most likely somebody came in after her friends had left and, did something. And, from the scene itself, it seemed like a crime of passion, and it was just complete overkill for what was, what had been done to her. And none of the neighbors would say, be able to give the police any clues. They didn't see or hear a thing that night. And as you can imagine how heartbreaking this must have been for Angie's family, especially for her mother, Carol, who just the night before had, made up with her daughter. And then, a couple of hours later, the following day, she's having to go to the police station to identify her daughter's dead, murdered body. Angie's funeral was a big deal in town. Thousands attended to see her off. At the same time, however, gathering forensics from plenty of men who lived in the area, the case kind of trailed off cold, sort of relatively quickly. The police just seemed sort of unfamiliar with tackling a case sort of like this. They weren't equipped to deal with this high-profile murder case, of a murdered 18-year-old woman. They were sort of clueless from day one. They knocked on the doors, they pounded the pavement, but they sort of just had their thumb in their ass. I mean, I think they were probably just overwhelmed by the attention this was receiving and how gruesome the crime itself was, and that feeling of the police being overwhelmed and the pressure that would be on them from the public, from Carol specifically, to solve this would lead the police to do some very stupid things down the line.
And I don't care if they feel overwhelmed or not, man. Do your freaking job. You the freaking police. You the ones who supposed to be protecting and serving and solving these crimes and stuff, man. Do your damn job. Don't nobody want to hear nothing about you feeling overwhelmed. Oh my God, this don't never happen where we live. What? Well, go call the FBI or something. I know y'all 911, but call another 911 to get help. Seriously, man. And Mike just said it, y'all. Because earlier when I was I feel like somebody gonna fail or something gonna go wrong. Somebody gonna be acting crazy as far as these police or something. Ding, 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 ding. I was right, Bean Team. Let's go.
And before we continue, folks, let me talk to you about something.
Mike with his commercial. Well, that's crazy to me, man. I don't care nothing about no overwhelming. I don't want to hear that, man. Y'all the freaking police. Oh, let me take it back. Let's go.
Shraycon for supporting that chapter. Check him out and listen good. Now let's get back to it.
Back to it.
Carol Dodge was the one keeping this in the news. She was doing interviews, handing out flyers, keeping the pressure on the police to solve her daughter's murder. Now, friends, Angie's ex-boyfriend, you've seen this movie before, right? But they were all swiftly ruled out. From the start, the police, they really had no suspects to go off of. The police followed up with all of the friends who had been there the night before. All of them were cleared. It wasn't like one of them left, and then came back. But from the scene itself, it really seemed to be a crime of passion. And there was no forced entry. So that would lead you to believe that if it's a crime of passion, it was probably somebody who knew her and had some form of grudge against her. And with no forced entry, Angie likely knew them and let them into the home. So it's got to be somebody, she knew. They started off with her closest circle of friends and then going kind of outwards from there. Keep going out, until you get a hit. That was the plan. And boy, oh boy, did they get a hit, folks. From the police's point of view, all of this makes sense. All signs point in this direction. But what it led to was this just huge case of tunnel vision where they were simply looking in one direction and, throwing shit at the wall until something stuck, even if what stuck wasn't the correct thing. Tunnel vision can lead to the detriment of so many, investigations, but, they were hammers and all they saw were nails, not being able to see, the wider view, the bigger picture in the case. This would lead them to one group in particular that Angie hung out with, called the River Rats. Here we go, right? I mean, we're off to a great start with a group called the River Rats. They were just simply a group of teens all around Angie's age who hung around the banks of Snake River, hung out there over summer, drinking, smoking, just basically chilling out. They weren't like a bad group or anything. They weren't like real like little shitbags. There were some bad apples in the group, but overall, like, they weren't causing much trouble. They were just teens, young adults who were bored. I mean, it's not, they were just looking for something to do, and they weren't going to find something to do in a place like Idaho Falls. So therefore, your summers are just going to be dope and beer, which is a pretty good summer. Investigators started to kind of, skulking around this group, and over the course of the investigation, they spoke to a number of them, jotted down a couple of names of, some people they sort of wanted to, like, keep an eye on and such. I mean, if it's going to be somebody, it'll be a river rat, right? They would then have even more of a reason to speak to the River Rats about, like, 7 months after Angie Dodge's murder. In January of 1997, one of the River Rats, a fella named Benjamin Hobbs, was arrested after he raped a woman at knife point. This was just over the border in Ely, Nevada, but I mean, it had all like the same hallmarks of this case that was rapidly getting cold back in Benjamin Hobbs's home city of, Idaho Falls. A knife had been used on the victim, sexual assault. The victim was similar to Angie Dodge. Benjamin Hobbs would have known Angie Dodge as they hung out in like a similar friend group. It seemed like, I mean, from the police's point of view, when you're investigating this case and then you have this happen to Angie Dodge, then something else sort of similar, only, she wasn't killed, happened in a town just over the border. The commonality here is Benjamin Hobbs. They had spoken to him a few months previous, not long after the murder of Angie, and they'd kind of cleared him, but now it seems like he is definitely worth another goo. So Benjamin Hobbs was in jail in Nevada. They brought him back to Idaho Falls. They also asked another member of the River Rats to come in for questioning too. That was a Christopher Tapp. They asked Christopher Tapp to come in because he was Benjamin Hobbs' best buddy. They're like best friends 5 ever. So maybe, Benjamin, if he did do something to Angie, maybe he would have said something to Chris. Let's just feel him out. Benjamin, who had actually attended Angie's funeral, well, he gave the police an alibi for the night of Angie Dodge's murder, but it didn't check out. Or at least the police didn't want it to check out. I mean, as I said, they had tunnel vision. They became like full short. Benjamin Hobbs, he's clearly the murderer, and, being under such pressure, even if there was like some discrepancies, boy oh boy, they were just gonna like freight train right through any discrepancies to make sure they got their man.
And the way Mike describing it, I don't think it's actually Benjamin, y'all. I'm still stuck on the ex-boyfriend. Now, I know they said the ex-boyfriend was cleared and had an alibi or whatever, but I don't know, man. Like Mike said, they got tunnel vision on the wrong person right now. Let's go.
I'm telling you the truth. I had nothing to do with this. Honest to God. I had nothing to do with the murder of Angie Dodge. Well, and I wouldn't kill my friends. I'm sorry.
Triple checking his alibi. Okay, you know what? Technically, maybe it's possible he did it. Let's check his DNA, from the forensics we found at the scene. Ben, in the meantime, though, when he was questioned, he completely denied doing anything to Angie Dodge, said he wasn't involved in her murder, and he would later be convicted of his actions in Nevada. So he wasn't an angel regardless, but he was denying being Angie Dodge's killer.
Who do you really think killed her if it wasn't you? I don't know. I'm not going to point the finger at nobody because I really don't know. I'm not going to accuse somebody like I'm being accused. Why do you think somebody would want to kill him? I have no clue. It blew my mind because Angie was friends with everybody. She had no enemies.
At the same time, police were questioning Chris Tapp, Benjamin's best buddy. If Benjamin did it, he likely would have told Chris.
Why do you think you're doing it? Honestly, I have no idea. All thing I know is about Ben. I mean, I'm going to be straight up truthful with you. If I did anything know about this, I would say I could do nothing.
Chris Tapp, just like his friend Ben Hobbs, denied knowing anything about what happened to Angie. If Ben had done something, he never told Chris. Can't help you out. Sorry, guys. Don't know anything about it. But police were full sure that Ben had done it. So they told Chris, we have strong evidence that your best friend killed Angie Dodge. So you better tell us something. Chris would be like, no, he never told me anything. If you're covering for him, you could get in a lot of trouble for covering for a killer. We know he did it. Maybe he told you something. Maybe you just forgot. Maybe you got like some kind of repressed memories. I mean, Chris was still saying no, but they were really cornering him to try and get something out of him that they could use against Benjamin Hobbs, who was like totally putting up an iron wall. So Chris, just tell us something, case closed. But he wouldn't budge. Until a few days later passed. And then Chris would say, maybe Benjamin had told me something about the murder of Angie Dodge. In fact, I think he told me he murdered Angie Dodge. But at the time, he told me it kind of like as a joke, like a dark joke, after she'd been killed. But now that I think about it, 7 months later, I think he was being truthful. I think he really did tell me, the police are right. He did kill her.
I said, oh, and what'd you do to her? How did you do it? What?
I think at this point, Chris was really just trying to be helpful to the police, and he was looking back on things Benjamin had told him over the months, and he was basically putting, 2 and 2 together and getting 5. And he was like, police, you are right. If you have strong evidence against him, we'll all help you out. Here's more stuff you didn't know. Chris Tapp began to speak to the police a lot, in fact, about the murder of Angie Dodge, because Chris Tapp believed that if you have nothing to hide, why not tell them everything? Why not cooperate to the best of your ability? And boy, oh boy, did he cooperate. Chris really trusted the police because in school, like in high school, Chris had been a bit of a troubled youth, and he actually had some police officers who had kind of helped him stay on the straight and narrow, kind of stopped him from getting into too much trouble, and it kind of kept things going for him. So he'd only like positive outcomes and positive, interactions with the police. All of that is great, right? That's what police should be doing, serving their community. But now the police were under pressure themselves to solve this murder. For example, one of the officers interviewing Chris was in fact the very same officer who had helped Chris out when he'd gotten into some minor trouble while in school. So, Chris thought, well, you helped me out then. I'm sure you're only helping me out now. And we trust each other. Sure. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
I trust you guys too at this point period of time of my life.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. You trust us that, we do see the big picture here a little bit more so than Chris.
Chris would ultimately speak to the police for over 100 hours combined. That's a lot of interviews. And over the course of about 1 month, he would do 9 police interviews, which were more like interrogations, and 7 polygraphs, 7 lie detector tests, which is sort of overkill for a technology that is inadmissible. But every time he would do one of these lie detector tests, they would just, it would keep coming back. And the police would just say to Chris, you're not being truthful. You're lying. We know you're lying. We know you know more about what Ben Hobbs did, maybe even what you did. They actually began literally threatening Chris.
Hypothetically, if Chris Tapp was holding on to Angie, she was being cut, and then some other stuff was going on. If Chris Tapp took part in the night in any way, shape, or form in cutting her, okay? But I didn't. Did you listen to that? Okay? Hypothetically. If you took part in any of that, that's okay. Because you're still here, you're still showing some good faith that you want to cooperate.
I don't know what went wrong with me. I'm trying to give it to you. I mean, that's all I can. Can I just go back to the beginning? I was never there. I wasn't involved.
Initially, Chris didn't have a lawyer
No,
present.
man, this is nasty work, man, from these detectives and these police officers, man, doing this investigation. Like, this is nasty work, y'all. Like, seriously, man, the way they pressuring, and now we done just went from just not only just pressuring him to admit that the dude did something. Now y'all freaking threatening him, ready to act like y'all gonna throw him in prison, trying to say he involved if he don't admit that his homeboy was involved. This is nasty, man. 7 polygraphs? I mean, damn, how much more evidence you want? Man, that's crazy. The man did over 100 freaking hours of freaking interviews and issue with y'all.
But he ended up doing so many interviews, his family hired one. But because he was doing so many interviews, The attorney wasn't always there. His lawyer wasn't always there for every single one. And Chris's alibi for the night of Angie Dodge's murder was like shaky at best. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why didn't Chris just say to the police, I'm not speaking to you anymore, I'm not speaking without a lawyer present anymore? He would be asked why he didn't do that much later on. Chris said, didn't know you could do that. He didn't know you don't have to talk to the police. Because again, he trusted them. Chris Tapp didn't know it, but he had made himself suspect number one and like beyond.
What if you did? Okay, cut her once. Okay, so you cut her once. I didn't cut her. Okay. Pass the knife off to you, obviously. Okay, and it's alright, Chris. I didn't take it. Damn.
He would take these polygraphs and fail. He was lying like a rug, the police said. And so he began to talk. At first he would say, oh, Ben Hobbs told me about how he had brutally attacked and murdered Angie Dodge. Then over time he became a character in his own story. He was there, he witnessed it, he was able to describe it all. Of course, being like, fed information of the crime itself.
You're there with Chris Tapp.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, buddy, you going on. About what? Without killing them.
I had nothing to do with it, no. So how can I be guilty of something? And how would he know what I did, what I didn't do?
Well, that's what we're here to find out.
Good.
That's what we're here to find
I'm
out.
not very happy. So,
Well, I can tell you not very happy. Why would Chris start turning on you for this?
I don't know, it's good, but something I was like,
No, that's something I'd like to know.
He's saying that it was really sick, it was barbaric. He's breaking down the crime, saying that it was sick, and that you had told him several times that, or told him that you had cut her several times.
maybe he's trying to get out of what maybe he's guilty of something that
Do you think you killed her?
I don't know if he did or not. I don't know who did. All I know is I did not kill Angie Dodge. I'm not guilty. And I will stand on that till the day I die. I'm not guilty.
Chris Tapp
Like nasty work, y'all. Now they got the friends turning on each other and blaming each other for the freaking murder. These freaking investigators know what they doing too. They being so like low down and sneaky and manipulative towards these two dudes. And at the end of the day, I honestly feel like in their heart of hearts, they know neither one of them did it. That's what I'm starting to feel like now. I don't know, y'all. This is crazy. Let's go.
tell 6 differing stories of what had happened that night. Just trying to tell the police what he thought they wanted to hear. And the police were just like licking their chops with every new story that would come out as and more. Ooh, this is great stuff. Well, Chris, you're really helping us out. Thanks. Even though the DNA tests from the DNA they found at the scene came back negatory, it cleared him. It cleared Benjamin Hobbs. It cleared all the Riverets. None of them were, forensically proven to have been there and killed Angie. Didn't matter. So the police would question him on that. We know you were there and we know Benjamin Hobbs was there. Who was the third man who was there, who left the DNA that we found? Because we can't identify this DNA. And Chris would be like, thinking about it again, man, better answer this question. He would name another friend, a guy named Jeremy Sargis, and he would say, yeah, it was the 3 of us were there. It was Jeremy. He was also there. That's probably his DNA. So the police would go and drag Jeremy in for questioning. Again, don't know what you're talking about, wasn't involved. They would test his DNA. It wouldn't match. So the police in turn would go back to Chris. You're lying again. You're still lying to us. You know what happened. Chris would then say, did I say Jeremy? I meant Mike. Mike was the other guy there. I don't know his surname. I don't know where he's from. I don't know who he is. But he's the one who killed. That's his DNA. This Mike fella. You can see here how Chris was digging his own grave just deeper and deeper. The detective saw him as vulnerable, and the other person they had, Benjamin Hobbs, was just not giving them a thing. Chris Tapp was the easy target, so they just, went for him.
How many times did you cut her?
Just once.
Did she say anything?
Hell,
You heard her say help?
I just didn't do nothing.
Ben and Jeremy also were just much smarter than Chris. They knew. Don't give them shit. Though as I said, countless interviews, like 9+, 7+ lie detector tests, I think that would probably wear down most people, and Chris just simply did not. He was just simply unaware that you can ask for, to not speak to the police, or say, I don't want to speak to the police without a lawyer present. He just didn't know that. He was just naive, and he just gave them what they wanted to hear, what he thought they wanted to hear. The police were feeding each of their suspects information, hoping that one would turn on the other, and if one cracked, hopefully the next one would crack. The only one that little ploy was working on was Chris Tapp. The police even promised Chris immunity if he confessed, and he could see that he himself was digging a hole. I'll confess more and more to get that immunity, but of course the immunity goes yoink as soon as he says what he says.
But you gotta protect your own. You gotta save your life. Period. Gotta save your life. Sure, you got deeply involved. You got forced into doing something you didn't want to do. And you're worried about going into life. What your hope is right now, at home, is to get it out. Get it proved that, hey, I didn't want to. My God, I was stuck there. I had two guys who were going to hurt me. They were going to kill me. I was afraid of my life. She was dying. I did this. But you tell me which is best. Serving quite a long time, and I can't tell you how much. It could be 2 years. It could be 5 years. It could be 10 years, 25 years. But is that better than life or death? One of them, guarantee you, is life. The other one's going to be death. Protect your yes. And that's between you and I. Because, like I said, I wouldn't say this fucking lead you to a cold blooded killer. You got trapped. Alright. Did Ben Hobbs force you to cut Angie Dodge across the right breast with a knife, or he said he killed you? Yes. And I know it. Give your hand.
Like, these damn police done broke all this man down so bad mentally being teen to I believe that he actually believed that he killed or had something to do with it. You know what I'm saying? Actually killed Angela or was in the room with Ben and Jeremy, I think, or whoever. Like, everything the police is feeding him, he's starting to, like, really manifest it in his brain like it actually happened. It's, like, completely different from when his first time going up and having his first interview. Like, dude, you ain't had nothing to do with this. I wonder if he really finna go to prison for this or not. It seems like we going to that level now. Let's find out.
So with no physical evidence actually tying him to the scene, Chris Tapp was charged with murder. He admitted he was there, he admitted he saw everything, though that admittance was, it was basically done with a gun to his head. And the DNA that didn't match, well, the police said, there's this some unnamed person there that Chris Tapp will not tell us who this other person is. He's still out there, but we got Chris. He went on trial in May 1998. He said he didn't do it, recanted, said his confession had been coerced by the police, and there was no evidence tying him to the scene. He knew he had gotten himself into this situation, but it was far too late. He thought the cops were looking out for him, they were pinning it on him. Witnesses would testify at trial, saying, oh yeah, we heard Chris and Ben. We overheard them talking about the murder, saying how they had brutally killed Angie Dodge. So the prosecution had witnesses overhearing them talking about it, allegedly, and then Chris Tapp's own words himself saying everything that was done. And of course, the main evidence was the DNA that won't match, but you can still blame Chris for that because he won't tell us who. They were going to try and go after Benjamin Hobbs also, but he just wouldn't give them anything, and the police had nothing on him, so they just stuck with Chris. After 13 hours, the jury came back, and Chris Tapp was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison.
Oh! Damn, that answered my question right there. They gave this man life in prison for some shit he ain't have nothing to do with.
The Dodge family, Earl especially, wanted Chris Tapp to get the death penalty. The witnesses, by the way, who testified at trial, they would later come back and say they had been coerced into testifying. They had never overheard Chris or Benjamin or anybody talk about the murder of Angie Dodge. Chris would appeal from prison, say he didn't have a lawyer present when he confessed, saying he was coerced, it would be dismissed. appeal again, dismissed, appeal again, and so on and so it goes. Carol Dodge, however, Angie Dodge's mom, didn't think it was over. Even though Chris was sentenced to life in prison, it was not over for her. After all, another man had been there. There was still that unidentified mystery DNA found at the scene where her daughter was brutally murdered. She wanted justice for her daughter and wouldn't give up. Okay, you have Chris. Who's this other guy? Allegedly Benjamin was there, but nothing ever happened to him. She wouldn't give up. She wouldn't give up for her daughter, and she wouldn't rest until that unidentified man had been found. And years went by. A decade would go by. Carol Dodge eventually came into contact with a Dr. Greg Hampikian, who was a forensic DNA expert. And she thought, well, if anybody can find this DNA, it'll be Dr. Hampikian. Carol Dodge brought the DNA to him and asked him to investigate. Technology at this point was rapidly progressing, so maybe, he's an expert. He will get the answers that she's looking for to identify this man. Thing was, Dr. Greg Hampikian was also the founder of the Idaho Innocence Project. When Carol Dodge brought the case of her daughter's murder to the doctor, he was already familiar with it because Chris Tapp had written to him a few years earlier, asking for help, asking to clear his name. To whom it may concern, my name is Christopher Tapp, and I'm asking for your help in my case. My old lawyer, something Thomas, has talked to you about my case, and she believes in you, so I'm asking for whatever help you can give me. I don't know what you need from me, as in information on the basics of my case. I'm open and honest and willing to give you any help. So please look into my case, because I truly need someone help to get me free. I didn't kill or hurt anyone. I never raped anyone. I hope that I hear from you soon. So now Dr. Hampikian had two people asking for his help with the same case. One of those people being the mother of the victim. The other person being the killer, the convicted killer asking to help clear his name. He took on the case. They were sent forensics and all of the case evidence from the Idaho Falls Police Department. They were not only sent, the forensics and the DNA, they were actually sent basically the entire case file, which included all of the interviews Christopher Tapp had done with the detectives and the police officers there. Interviews which clearly showed anybody with half a brain that Chris Tapp had been coerced into admitting he had done it. It was this is clear as day what they had done to him. So they immediately began theorizing that Chris was innocent. Then going through all of the forensics found at the scene, they were ultimately able to prove their theory. There wasn't three people there. There was only one person there. Chris Tapp was not that person. There was not three killers, there was one. They still needed to find out who he was. Over time, and as more and more came out, kind of amazingly, Carol Dodge actually became a defender of the man convicted of her daughter's murder, Chris Tapp. She began calling for his release. They became friends, they would write to each other all the time. And Carol Dodge, who once had wished him death, now was seeing that Chris Tapp was a victim just like her daughter was a victim. He too was a victim of this mystery killer and a victim of the Idaho Falls Police Department. Freeing Chris and finding the real killer now was the goal. Even though Chris appealed his conviction 4 times, 4 times it was denied.
Tapp's attorney says their argument is that Chris Tapp falsely confessed to the murder.
Everything that was tested as far as DNA goes, Christopher Tapp's DNA did not show up. There's no DNA from Chris. So all signs are pointing to a false confession rather than to Chris being at the scene of the crime.
Carol Dodge was now pushing the police to use this brand new shampoo technology called familial DNA testing. Maybe you won't find the killer, but you will find a relation of the killers. Anyone the killer is related to. Most famously, this was used in the case of the Golden State Killer, right? They found his DNA at the crime scenes, they put it into the system, and they found the Golden State Killer's, great-great-great-great-granddad. And so they know the killer is related to this person. Let's go down. In the Golden State Killer case, I think it was something like 1,000 suspects they had that the DNA was narrowed down to. It could be one of these 1,000 people. One of these 1,000 people will be an exact match, not just a partial match. So then, having this list of 1,000 people that the killer could be, you go through and you simply just go through and try and knock off each and every one by their age, where they lived, their occupation. You narrow it down, excluding one by one, until you get a small enough pool of people, and then you can go and individually test each and every one of them. That's what they did. That's how they found a killer. They were going to use that same process to try and find out who was Angie Dodge's real killer. You can see on one hand how it would be like incredibly useful for pretty disturbing, crimes like in this one. I mean, how else would they find the killer? But on the other hand, you can see how it's also an incredibly disturbing, invasion of privacy that this technology is. Perhaps it's a necessary evil, but you'd also wonder, like, what else can this technology be used for? And it's sort of unsettling, but that's what they did with the DNA found on Angie Dodge. This was around 2014, and they used this DNA and it linked them to a Michael Ussery Jr. This Michael Ussery Jr. raised eyebrows actually almost immediately. Now, the DNA was more of a partial match to his father, Michael Ussery Sr., but the Jr. seemed to be the more kind of suspect one by his age range. He had lived or been in Idaho Falls around the time of Angie Dodge's murder. The name Mike, Chris Tapp had mentioned a Mike, even though his story was kind of invented. That's twice the name Mike or Michael is popping up in this story, and Michael, well, he made horror movies. So for the police themselves thinking about this, it wasn't a huge leap. If he killed somebody, maybe he liked to make videos about this kind of stuff. So the police went, they knocked on his door, and they asked to speak with him about some mysterious hit and run they believed he had been involved in. They asked for his DNA, and they began asking him questions about, where were you over the summer of 1996? What do you know about Idaho Falls? As I said, they took his DNA and then they left. It was only after they left that Michael was like, oh, shit, Angie Dodge. And I just gave them my DNA. Now, he was eventually cleared, but not for a month. So you can imagine that would have been a very uncomfortable month for Michael, just waiting for that knock on the door when they're going to drag you away. And speaking of doors, by the way, Chris Tapp walked out of one in 2017, a free man. Finally. Everyone now was believing him to be innocent.
Wow, Bean Team, he did get out of freaking prison though, and W Carol, you know what I'm saying, Angie, mama, cause she started. It's so crazy how she went from wanting this man to get the death penalty to now want him to be a free living man. You know what I'm saying, man? But I still don't know who the freak did this ish, y'all. And in a weird type of way, I'm still thinking that there's a possibility that maybe the boyfriend did it. But I also want to say real quick, I like this new technology. Now, I get what Mike's saying as far as like, what else can this technology do? This DNA technology, how you basically just use process of elimination, going down a big ass family tree. You know what I'm saying, man? I think it can and has and will do more freaking harm than good in the long run. At least I hope. But I still don't know who did this ish, y'all. I thought it was Mike. Well, Mike from that chapter just said he got cleared. I don't know. We got a little bit while more to go. Let's go.
Plan and hope and dream while you're in prison on what you want to do when you get out. And now that I've been released, all them ideas and plans have changed.
It's now been just over a month since Chris Tapp was released from prison after serving more than 20 years behind bars for the rape and murder of Angie Dodge back in 1996.
I can't be the man that I was 20 years ago before I went to prison. And I can't be the man that I was in prison. So figuring out what to be or how to be is scary.
Since his release, Chris says he's got a lot of things to catch up on, like learning the internet, cars that talk to you, even self-checkout at the grocery store. But on top of his list, thanking those that helped him along the way, including one of his biggest supporters, Carol Dodge, Angie's mother.
She is a second mother to me. We stay in contact, we talk. You know, she gives me her advice, she gives me her opinion, she tells me if I'm doing something wrong or if I'm doing something right.
Chris says he now has a job and is excited to feel like a member of society again. But he says it's scary because he feels like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He doesn't want to disappoint anyone who helped him. So he's just taking things day by day.
The only thing I can see my life going is trying to take the baby steps to produce a life. I don't know, where life is going to take me or what will come, because the real world is different than whatever we think it is in prison.
He appealed that year, 2017, and with so much evidence, so many people in his corner, the rape charge was rescinded and the murder charge was reduced to time served. So he was still a convicted murderer, but he was allowed to walk out of prison, a free man after spending 20 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. A lot of people probably wouldn't have taken that deal where you're still, convicted of the crime even though you didn't do it, but I mean, who wouldn't want to just walk out the doors of the prison after spending 2 decades in bars? He did sue the city of Idaho Falls and was rewarded $11 million. That ain't gonna get you those 20 years of your life back though, so, least they can do. Though later in
At least they can freaking do it. It ain't gonna get his 20 years back, but at least take that, Chris. Like, seriously, man. 20 goddamn years, y'all, of his life just gone from these freaking goddamn police. I said it at the beginning, man. I'm like, it's gonna be some big time failures with the justice system, judicial, investigators, police, whoever. You know what I'm saying? And boy, they failed this man for 20 years of his freaking life. Stuck in prison for some ish he ain't freaking do. Are we gonna get the real killer or not? I think earlier I said that this product is gonna be an unsolved mystery, and I guess it is, being team. Let's find out. 20 years.
2019, who was exonerated of the charges of murder, so he was totally cleared. And he was sort of free, just like the police who coerced him into spending 2 decades of his life behind bars. Nothing ever happened. They got no blowback at all. And it was then they got someone new. They continued using the familial DNA that they had previously, and it brought up new matches. It led them to some new people. Clarence and Cleo Usery, which is very similar to Ussery, to the Michael Ussery Jr. case. So they're probably related, probably some extended family DNA there. Goes back to the old country, something like that. Now, both Clarence and Cleo, the partial matches, they were long dead. But one of their descendants was likely the real killer who had left the DNA behind on Angie Dodge's body. So, much like in all the other cases, one by one, they clear them. Age, is he a male? Occupation, was he in Idaho Falls in the summer of 1996?
Through the development of technology, Idaho Falls police now have an image of who her suspected killer could be. On the left is a picture of the suspect at 25 years old. On the right is him now at 40. Experts say the goal of this is not identification, but to really exclude people from a suspect list who do not match the characteristics described in the phenotype.
They eventually narrowed it down to 6 people who lived in the Idaho area that summer. In fact, one lived in Idaho Falls that specific time, but once again, partial match. Not a full match to the killer. They were sort of back at ground zero and had gone through all of the descendants until one genealogist made a simple discovery, but one that was sort of easily missed. There was a male descendant of Clarence and Cleo who had a son with a woman. That relationship did not last, and the woman ended up taking the son and married another man. The son took the new husband's name, took their stepdad's name. The stepdad's name was Drips. So they had another descendant who was not appearing on any of the family trees because his surname was different. And they investigated this Drips. By blood, it was a Usery. By name, he was a Drips. And funnily enough, didn't he just live in Idaho Falls in the summer of 1996? In fact, didn't he just live directly across the street from Angie Dodge in the summer of 1996? And he still lived in the state come 2019. His name was Brian Lee Drips Sr. Brian Lee Drips didn't have a violent criminal history, couple of misdemeanors, but the police, well, let's test his DNA. Maybe it will be a full match to it. They started following him around, scoping him out, covert like. Eventually, one day, he threw a cigarette out of his car window. Police nabbed it, tested it, and bingo. It was a full match to the DNA found at the murder scene of Angie Dodge 23 years earlier. Brian Drips had been living in Idaho the entire time. He was 30 years old at the time of the murder. As he lived across the road from Angie Dodge, he'd even been interviewed at the time, but had a good alibi. Police didn't waste any time on him. They moved on to the next person. The police brought him in and showed him the DNA. And after a brief, don't know what you're on about, he confessed to the murder of Angie Dodge.
That's crazy, man. Now I got to think about it from just the other part. Just the fact that that asshole got to live freely for 23 years. You know what I'm saying? Glad he got caught, Bean Team. That's why I said, man, I think that's a great addition to the DNA technology. You know what I'm saying? Because it helped catch this mother, you know what. But it's just thinking about this man was 30 and now he all old and gray. You know what I'm saying? When he finally get freaking caught.
Questions you have for us, Deacon West? Where to start?
Yeah. What's basically going on, that murder case, it's the only thing I can think of that happened when I was living there. What I remember that night was drinking with my buddies and woke up the next day and there was a cop car sitting out front and I went to work. And that's all I really remember. There was that kid that they did arrest and got charged with it, you know, and that the mom, I guess, said that he wasn't, he never did it.
So you would just be completely shocked if we had your DNA at the scene?
Yep.
We have your DNA at the scene.
Idiot.
That's why we're here.
When you hear him, it sort of seemed like it had been eating away at him. He said that on that June night in 1996, he'd been drinking, he'd been doing drugs, and he had seen Angie Dodge move in across the street from him only 3 weeks earlier. He'd been watching her place, he had seen her friends leave, and so he walked over himself. He said he was out of his mind, he said he only intended on raping her, and it ended up in just a brutal murder.
I went to favor because I was almost up on coke and drunk.
How did you get in?
I just walked to the door.
Did she say anything to you? Was she screaming, calling for help?
I don't recall that she did, no.
But she fought?
Yes, and I think that's when it ended up.
What did you use?
A knife.
Was she moving at all when you left?
I don't remember.
Did someone go with you over there?
No.
If you were trying to take the blame and there was other people involved, or...
No.
O'Brien, at this point, it's our obligation to tell you that you are under arrest.
Councilman, will I say it before you do that?
And another thing real quick too, Bean Team, just the fact that he seen Chris, you know what I'm saying, just through the news and stuff. He knew what the freak was going on. He just talked about it. I heard that kid got locked up for it. He knew that Chris had went to prison for life, and he's knowing damn well he the one who actually did it and ain't telling nobody. You get what I'm saying, man? Like, he just sitting in the corner, like, trying to make sure that nobody know he the one who the freaking murderer. I'm glad they end up catching his ass, but like I said, it just, he was free for 23 years before they actually caught him.
He pleaded guilty, and he was sentenced to life with parole after 20 years, which, at his age, and he has numerous health problems, it's basically a life sentence.
Never again did I ever get able to hold her again. Because of your actions, your evil actions, your selfish actions. And I can't forgive you. Ever. You, Brian Drips, deserve eternal hell.
I'd like to say that I'm sorry. I didn't intend for this to happen. I can't imagine what grief I've caused over the last 25 years. I'm sorry. I know you'll never forgive me, but I'm sorry.
And so finally, justice for Angie Dodge. The right man is behind bars, the wrong man is out of them. Finally, he was finally free. Chris Tapps was finally free. For a bit. This part of my story is ongoing, but in 2023, Chris Tapp was in Las Vegas partying. It was at a Halloween party. I'm going to be using allegedly a lot for this part because it was an ongoing, it still is an ongoing case, but at a Halloween party in Las Vegas, Chris Tapp allegedly offered a young woman some cocaine. I don't know whether she took it or not, but she went back in and told her family, who were also at this Halloween party, this guy in the bathroom or in the bedroom just offered me coke. The person she said this to was her stepdad, who was a guy named Daniel Rodimer, who was a former congressional congressman.
America has some big problems, and they all come from our nation's capital.
And also a former WWE wrestler. He was allegedly furious that his stepdaughter had been offered cocaine. He went in to him and was overheard. Witnesses heard him say, "If you speak to my daughter again, I will expletive kill you." And then he killed him.
Oh.
2 loud bangs were heard and Chris was rushed to the hospital where he sadly passed away 5 days later. At the time, it was actually ruled as an accident. Now, I'm not saying there was like a cover-up at the party, but nobody was willing to come forward and say what they believed happened to Chris Tapp, because after those 2 loud bangs were heard, and then you see Daniel Rodimer, big angry head in him, come out of the room. They went in, Chris Tapp was covered in bruises on his face, and he went to lie down, symptom of concussion. He was rushed to hospital, but they would say, oh, he fell, and it was an accident. It was then the coroner was examining the body about a week after, and they ruled it homicide, that Chris Tapp had died of blunt force trauma. And then finding more witnesses who would come forward and say what they heard at the party, an arrest warrant was issued for Daniel Rodimer, but he turned himself in. Daniel Rodimer has not gone on trial yet, and he is appealing the charges that are against him. And there you have it. That is the case of Angie Dodge. It lasted decades, and tragically you had the wrong man behind bars for 2 of those decades until he was finally freed, and the real killer was across the street the entire time. In the end, they got him. On the other side, you have Chris Tapp, who, after 2 decades in prison, he ends up being killed by a wrestler, former wrestler. And you gotta wonder, like, if he hadn't spent his time in prison, if he hadn't gone to prison at all, maybe he wouldn't have killed. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten... I don't know if he was dealing drugs or he just had some on him for the party and he was here, do you want some? I don't know. But you kind of gotta wonder how all of this led to one another. But that's at least 2 people dying in this story, which is incredibly tragic. Justice was sort of served in the end, but I think in the case of Angie Dodge, nobody really wins. Nobody really wins in this case. And that'll do for now. Thank you so much for watching, folks. It really means a lot to me that you're here watching this whole video. Shameless plug time. Please check out the That Chapter merch, which you can find down below in the description, or fourth wall, That Chapter. Please check out the That Chapter podcast, which is a brand new podcast exclusive story every single Monday. All exclusive stories that aren't told here on the main YouTube channel. And yeah, you can also check out the Patreon for $2 a month to get early access to all videos, and there's a playlist of exclusive videos and a Discord, so you can check that out too. But until the next whole video, which will be up when it's up, thanks again for watching. Please take care of each other and yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.
Yeah, Bean Team, it is always a delight when we get to go back to Mike, man. Another great That Chapter Wednesday. And I just want to say, man, Mama Angie again. And the thing about Carol too, y'all, because earlier I was talking about how at least she got to make good with Angie before she died, because they had been beefing or whatever, but at least they was able to make up right before she died, literally the day before she died. But also in this case, I just want to say that I'm also happy that she really found out who the killer of her daughter was before she passed away, because I don't know what her age was, but she looked like by this point she was in her 70s, maybe 80s, late 60s at the very least. You know what I'm saying, man? And she was able to actually find that out after 23 freaking years. But I also agree with Mike that nobody really won in this case, especially when you look at the fact that Chris ended up getting killed when he get out of prison 2 years later. You know what I'm saying? That's also crazy, y'all, that he got murdered. And it's like, it's just this was just a crazy one, man. This is just this was a lot, Bean Team. This one here had a lot of different layers of freaking craziness to it, y'all. I'm glad that dude ended up getting caught, But damn, man, it took him 23 years. Like I said, just the fact that he knew that he the one who had killed her, and he know that another man being charged for it while he out here just living all freely all this time. And I do think that it was eating him up. You know what I'm saying? I do feel like it was eating him up that he had did it. But he got away with it, and he just tried to get away with it for as long as he can. Just think about the fact that he was living across the street from the house where he had killed somebody, and don't nobody know but him and Angie and God, and Angie ain't here no more. Like, that junk just crazy, being team. It is freaking crazy. But I digress. I'm gonna go let y'all go now, man, because hey, y'all know Mike from That Chapter videos already be long enough. I appreciate y'all coming on back as always. And before you leave, just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and do all that if you ain't did that yet. And remember this: love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.
If you're feeling lonely today, come along and throw your cares away. We're really glad that you're our friend, and this is a friendship that'll never ever end.
Run!